My name's Jessica Stewart. I'm the Executive Director of Family and Community Services Insights Analysis and Research, also known as FACSIA in the New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that wherever we are joining from today, we're all living and working on Aboriginal land. I'd personally like to acknowledge the Bidjigal and Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the owners and First Nations people of the area from which I'm dialing in from. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging leaders, and extend that to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues who may be joining us today. I'd also like to warmly welcome you all, our webinar participants. We have had a fantastic response with almost 1,000 people registering for today, and many of you will join us today, and I'm sure many will be listening to this after the event. So thank you for your interest. It's really fantastic. So this FACSIA Lunch and Learn will have a focus on how to best support positive and lasting connections for children in care by providing key research insights and by exploring practice approaches that support meaningful family time. Our presenters will present research from the Pathways of Care longitudinal study and the Fostering Lifelong Connections study. After these presentations, we'll have a panel discussion. So we have a great lineup today with Rebecca Hinchy from our Child and Family team in our policy area, as well as Madeline Gill and Joel Frost from the Office of the Senior Practitioner, who will discuss the very latest practice advice about family time and its importance in fostering long-lasting connections for children in care. After the speakers present, we'll then have a panel session, so we'll have a time for a short Q&A. If you have any questions, please just put them in the chat column in the chat box during the presentations, and I'll be able to come back to these at the end. So at this time, I would like to now introduce our fantastic presenters. Professor Judy Cashmore, who many of you I'm sure will know, is a developmental psychologist and professor of socio-legal research and policy at the University of Sydney. She has long-standing experience in socio-legal research, law, developmental psychology, social work, criminology, and child rights, and is a founding member of our Pathways of Care longitudinal study. Professor Judy Cashmore will be presenting on findings from the Pathways of Care study. Dr. Susan Collings is a Senior Research Fellow with the Research Centre for Children and Families at the University of Sydney. Susan is a Chief Investigator on the Fostering Lifelong Connections study. And Dr. Sarah Chifchi is a Research Associate with the Research Centre for Children and Families at the University of Sydney. Sarah is a Project Coordinator of the Fostering Lifelong Connections study. So Susan and Sarah will be presenting the final outputs of their major Australian Research Council funded project, the Fostering Lifelong Connections study, which is a collaboration among the University of Sydney, 7 NGO out-of-home care agencies and our department, DCJ. So thank you again. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I will hand over to Judy to start the presentations. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jess. And I'd like to pay my respects to all people, and in fact, I'll use this, I'll go back to that one. Acknowledging the custodianship and law of the country on which the University of Sydney campuses stand. And the work that you can see here, and you'll see it again when Sarah and Susan talk, is by one of our colleagues, beautiful artwork by Lynn Riley. I'd also just like to pay tribute to Dr. Alan Taylor, who did a lot of the analysis on the work that I'm going to present, which is in relation to the Pathways of Care study. Unfortunately, Alan died earlier this year, but he was a key member of the Pathways POCLs team and so on, and a really great colleague. What I'm going to talk about today is actually provide the sort of theoretical and background work and analysis from the Pathways of Care study, which will provide the framework for what Susan and Sarah will be talking about. How do you actually go about this? But what I'm talking about to begin with is really, what do we know and why would we do it? How important is it? And all the research and what's coming out of Pathways of Care is making it very clear that children thrive when they have people around them that love and care for them. and the more people, the better. So what we're looking at in terms of what Alan and I and others have been looking at coming out of the Pathways of Care is about children's relationships. Children, whoever they are, need people around them that love and care for them. And for children in care, that includes that sort of difficult juggling, emotional juggle sometimes between those who are doing the actual caring and they're living with and those in their families that they're no longer living with. So we're looking at to what extent do children have contact with the people that they're living with their birth family and their kinship network. What's their relationships? What are the problems that can emerge in that process? And particularly the importance of belonging. That's what's important for all of us. So moving on, just wanted to go back to a study that Marina Paxman, who's also been managing a lot of the work around Pathways of Care for quite some time, and that is the big question, who is important in children's lives? It's about their relationships and their choices, and it's listening to their views that's critical and is what makes Pathways of Care so important. When Marina and I did this study of leaving care, it was then called Wards Leaving Care, some time ago, we're looking at the mid-1990s and we followed them through. The best predictors of how well these young people were doing 4 to 5 years after they left care were how many supportive people they had around them. And that included carers, in some cases, caseworkers, teachers, mentors, and family members. And what was really important is those that could answer the question, have you ever had anyone in your life that you felt loved you, anywhere that you could call home? They were the young people who were faring well across the board. They were in good, positive relationships. They were in stable employment or study, and those who could not answer that question, and luckily fortunately it was quite few, they were the ones that we interviewed in prison and in refuges and in difficult circumstances. So it's about it's a summative issue. It's not an either or, it's the more, the better. And the quality and stability of those relationships that really matters. This slide looks a bit scary, but it's actually just about what are the measures that we had or we have in the Pathways of Care study and how do they interact with each other? Because for all of us in our lives, it's not, there's a lot of things that make a difference to how we all do, how we're faring, and it's about the relationships around us and all the different aspects of that. So for children in care, it involves things like how long have they been in their placement? How often do they see family members? Are they living with kin and people that really they feel very comfortable with? Do they have siblings in their home? How emotionally responsive do they feel that those they're living with are and those they have contact with? And how do their carers feel about this? How well do they think care's working? So it's about that whole mix. And so this one in the middle, which is the children's socio-emotional well-being, is an outcome measure. And that's what we were predicting too. So all of these around the outside are predictors and measures. But that's purely as background to give you a bit of a feel for what's going on. What we found in that we actually pretty much expected, and it came from a number of studies, but this is children in New South Wales, a whole cohort of children who entered care 2010, 2011 over an 18-month period and have been involved in that study and interviewed and their administrative data. And we're talking about 1,500 children, 1,600 children overall. But those children who are in relative kin care had more frequent face-to-face time with at least monthly with their parents, siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles and cousins. Maybe not all of those, but at least one of those. They had more contact with more family members across all waves. And they're more likely to be living with siblings. And they're also more likely for their carers to say that they had a good relationship with those family members. At each wave, there are about 10 to 20% of children who had contact with neither parent, and we'll come back to that as a measure in a moment. What's interesting and what I'm going to focus on is what's important and provides the background for what Susan and Sarah are going to talk about. One of the issues is that fathers can be a bit invisible in the care system sometimes, and we know that they're less likely to have contact with their children, but when they do, it tends to be reasonably seen to be positive, both by the children and by the carers. So the carers will say that the children seem to be more excited about going to care, going to visits with their fathers, and less upset afterwards. But that doesn't mean that there's any real differentiation in terms of mothers. What it means is that it may also be that there's a selection effect, but it does indicate that we probably need to put much more effort into engaging fathers in this process. They're also more likely to have unsupervised contact than mothers were. But again, that seems to be because the children are more likely to be in relative care with paternal relatives. So they're living with their paternal grandmother or their paternal aunt. So it comes back to the issue we need to encourage as many contacts with different people. So grandparents, aunts, uncles, and fathers in particular, and siblings, which we'll come to. The other aspect of contact, and one that we've all lived with for years through COVID, and we've actually we're all forced into alternative means of having contact with each other. But what's interesting that has come out of Pathways is that in fact we don't seem to be using these methods as much as we could do. So it's not surprising that phone is probably the most common, but you can see the differentiation there between children in foster care and those in relative kin care. If they're in relative kin care, they're 5 to twice as likely to be in contact via phone. So if you look at those figures in the red box, email minimal, social media minimal, although we don't necessarily know all that adolescents in particular what sort of contact they might be having and what might be reported. Mail, absolutely minimal now. But again, the overnight stays is interesting. If you look at it's much more likely, and perhaps not surprisingly, to occur when children are in relative kin care than when they're in foster care. But it does speak to the other means by which children can be kept in contact with their family members between face-to-face visits. Here we've got, Here we've got some of the issues that carers have raised about contact with birth family members. And this is pretty consistent, and it's consistent across studies here and elsewhere, that one of the major issues that they are concerned about is parents cancelling and not showing up, and in particular, the disappointment that causes children, and their problematic behaviours. Both of those are likely to be as a result of the emotional struggle that parents are undergoing in terms of managing that sort of contact. The other aspect is where the carers are saying that they think contact is having an adverse impact on the child, and that's more frequent for foster carers than it is for kin carers. It's also, although contact is face-to-face contact and so on is more common when children are in kinship care, it doesn't mean it's without problems. And understandably, there are some emotional struggles again between the carers and the birth family members, and particularly parents and mothers. And so there can be some hostility and the issues of parents turning up unexpected or not turning up when they're expected to. What's important here, though, is that very few birth parents and very few children said that they didn't want contact, and that there were real predictors as to how children are faring. And that's what I want to move on to now. But first, I will talk about what did the carers say about family contact? And most of them were saying, 80 to 90%, said that contact was meeting the needs of the children very well or fairly well, with the exception of foster carers of Aboriginal children. So again, that's a pointer to practice and policy. What is it about children in foster care with Aboriginal children in foster care, and particularly non-Aboriginal carers, that is making that difficult? And of course, we have the Family as Culture report that gives us a lot of insight. The other issue is that it was the carers were saying that they thought that the children needed more frequent or consistent time. They weren't necessarily, what we weren't seeing it as a contest in terms of wanting less frequent time. What they were looking for was less problems associated with it. And so it's about managing some of those problematic issues and some very practical issues about where do you meet, making it in a more congenial atmosphere. So the other issue is that the carers' reports of the extent to which contact's meeting the child's needs was consistently associated with the frequency of face-to-face time. And that's not surprising. If it's going well and they're saying it's, and they're able to meet more frequently, then of course it's all a feedback that the engagement, the more contact, more engagement between the carers and the birth family, the fewer the problems. If we look, and this is where it comes back to what we all want for children in care, is that they're faring well in social, emotional, cognitive development, and that they're feeling really comfortable about where they are, that they don't have behavioural and emotional problems in particular. And that's what these measures are about. So children who had contact with both or at least one parent were faring better than those who had contact with neither. Hardly surprising. Children who were living with siblings in the care household were also doing better than those who were not, whether or not they had those children not living with them had contact with siblings outside the home. Again, not that surprising. So children in relative kin care were also doing better than those in foster care, which is in line with their contact arrangements, and children whose carers said that the contact was meeting the children's needs and not having an adverse impact on them were also doing better. So all of those things are predicting to better outcomes for children in care. And again, it's, as I said, it's not a zero-sum game. What I've been talking about to this point is really about contact or contact with family time. But the children are also living in a care household with foster carers or with members of their family and kin. And children's rate, if the children said that they thought their carers were more emotionally responsive and that the children were very happy living there, and that the carers also self-reported that their own parenting style was warmer and less hostile, then children were doing better. Not surprising. I mean, most carers are saying that they're reporting warm and hostile and non-hostile parenting styles. And so you're getting to ceiling effects. But where you do get a differentiation, it is a clear predictor of how well the children are doing. So just finishing up, I just wanted to go to the major policy and practice implications that come out of that. As I said, it's a summative game here. Children thrive, and this is exactly what Sarah and Susan would be talking about. They thrive when they're surrounded by people who love and care for them. And that includes wherever they can get fathers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, mentors, coaches, and so on. They do well, very well, when the particularly in Aboriginal and CALD families, when their effort has been put in to find members of their family, those that they may not have had a lot of contact with beforehand, and if they're living with siblings, as long as that is safe and wanted by the children. It's not always in their best interests to be living with some siblings. And as I said, we need to look, when we look at those alternatives of other forms of contact, we need to be supporting those options. And again, that's what Sarah and Susan will be talking about. As in family law matters, we need to have care plans and processes going forward for kids in care that actually are sensitive. Children's needs change as they get older. They don't need to have plans that are set in concrete and don't respond to their changing needs. If they change interests in terms of what they're doing after school, what sports they're involved in, if they change placements, if they change other aspects of their lives, these care plans need to be very flexible and cater for those changes and be age appropriate. They also, really importantly, need to listen to what children have to say about it, because where they meet and whether they feel that it's in an appropriate place can make a real difference to how comfortable they are and how comfortable their parents and relatives are when they meet. So, and if children are coming back home to carers after contact and are acting out a bit, that, as in family law matters, that is something that might be expected, and it's about managing those transitions and the children's behaviours rather than blocking and saying we need to reduce contact. That's the wrong reaction to it. So asking children what works for them is clearly what we should be doing. And lastly, none of this just happens. You know, there are a lot of emotional challenges for everyone involved in this, for the children, for the carers, and for the parents. And finding good resources and ways to support it is what is really needed to make it manage the concerns, manage the problems, admit what those problems are, and try to mitigate them. Don't let all the burden fall on the carers or the parents, and try to support them and make it take place in appropriate places. And just very lastly, it's what we have seen and what's come out of overseas studies as well, is that if the carers and the birth family can get along with each other, that has a very positive effect. It's the same as after parental separation, if mothers and fathers can get along with each other and sort out problems around how things work and when they see each other and so on. The same is true here. If people who are around the children can reduce the conflict, work out how to do this better and engage with each other and are comfortable with it, then children will be more comfortable, and the overall payoff is in terms of how these children fare in their social and emotional development, and that's what we're all looking for. And that's what Susan and Sarah will be talking about, is some of the messages or some of the efforts and the resources that have been involved in the Fostering Lifelong Connections project. And it's one that I've been involved in. It's been terrific. I've really enjoyed it. So over to Susan and Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy, so much for that. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Sarah Chifchi. I've been the project coordinator of the Fostering Lifelong Connections study, which is what we're going to talk to you today about. And I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Susan Collings, who is a chief investigator on the study. Judy also was a chief investigator in the study, along with other colleagues. But first, I'd just like to acknowledge that we are joining you from the lands of the Gadigal people on the University of Sydney campus today. We pay our respects to elders past and present and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. And here again, you'll see an artwork by our colleague, Associate Professor Lynette Riley. She's also a chief investigator on the Fostering Lifelong Connections study, and has produced beautiful resources aimed at fostering cultural connections for children in care, including a set of Wiradjuri workbooks, which you can kind of see here I'm holding up, but you will get the links to those as well. So in our presentation today, I'll give a brief overview of the Fostering Lifelong Connections project, as well as the practices, the relationship building practices that were trialled by caseworkers who are participating in the study. And we'll share with you some of the magnificent practice resources that have been developed as part of the study to support ongoing and positive relationships between children's carer and families. And we encourage you to visit our legacy website for the project, where all of the resources that have been developed are housed. So to begin, just like to acknowledge that the Fostering Lifelong Connections study has really centred on sector collaboration. So it hasn't been sort of a university-based research study. It's really truly been a partnership. It was funded by an Australian Research Council linkage grant, and it involved a partnership with 8 organisations, DCJ, and 7 NGOs who deliver out-of-home care services in New South Wales. And not only did these organisations make a financial investment in this project, but they also supported their caseworkers and casework managers to participate as action researchers in this study. So you can see here in the photo, this was taken at the beginning of our study in February 2020. And these are all the caseworkers and casework managers who have participated in the study over 2 years. And we were really fortunate to have their practice wisdom and experience influence and shape this project. We couldn't have done it without them. It hinged entirely on their experience and developing sort of their practice-informed evidence. And we also had the university research team sitting alongside them, as well as some partner investigators. But a beautiful part of this project has been our expert reference group, which included not only experts by profession from organisations such as the Australian Childhood Foundation, but also experts by experience. So those were lived experience experts. We employed them as researchers on this study, and they included 2 mothers who have had children in care, 2 carers, as well as 2 young people with a care background. And they were heavily involved in developing a lot of the resources that you will see today. So the overall aim of the study was to develop, test, embed, and disseminate relationship building practices to encourage sustainable and positive relationships between children's carers and families for children in care, in long-term care. And we didn't mind if the children were in foster care, kinship care, so if the caseworkers were working with a mixed caseload. But it was really just about supporting the relationships for those children when they're in care. And it involved action research with 33 caseworkers and their managers over 2 years in 4 sites in New South Wales: Sydney, Wollongong, the Maitland sort of Newcastle area, and Dubbo. And underpinning our project were 3 key principles, and those were trauma awareness, cultural safety and respect, and reflective practice. And I think you'll see in the practices that were trialled over the 2 years how those principles really informed that. And in particular with reflective practice, part of the methodology was meeting with each team, site-based team, monthly, on a monthly basis over 2 years, where we sort of got that rich reflective data. So the caseworkers, I'll show you, trialled over 2 years 7 relationship building practices that you see listed here. And they met monthly with us to reflect on how that was going. And that's how we learned, really. And that was the rich source of data for us. So some of the practices that were trialled over the 2 years included debriefing, especially with parents, and Susan will talk about that a bit later on in this presentation, but really checking in with parents about what might be getting in the way for them attending family time, and also checking in with them afterwards to, see what worked well and what could be done to support them better in the future and any of their needs. And 6 other practices, which I don't believe I have time to go through, but we have actually presented at previous FACSIAR Lunch and Learn sessions around some of these, including cultural connections, where we worked with the Dubbo team to develop a suite of resources, including 2 beautiful videos that really point to the importance of connections to family and the interconnections, I guess, between the connections to family and connections to culture for Aboriginal children in care. And another practice that I will talk to you about in this session today was around carer coaching. And that was specifically around coaching carers to build their relationships to children, to children's family members. One of the wonderful things that has come out of this project is that with those 7 practices that were trialled by caseworkers over those 2 years, we've now turned those into 7 online learning modules. And they can be found on our project website, which will be shared with you. And each module contains key learnings from what we learnt doing that action research with the caseworkers, case studies and reflective questions, and practice resources that can be used to support that particular practice. So caseworkers might find that you're working with a particular family and that that family and that child is struggling perhaps with trauma responses before and after family visits, family time. And so you might be looking for some resources to support, the carer to co-regulate with that child. And you could navigate to Module 1, which is around supporting co-regulation, and download those resources to support your practice, for example. So now I'll just show you some of these practice resources and give you a taster of the key learnings. And I'll do that around the carer coaching module, which is module 2 in our online learning. And so it's really around coaching carers to develop relationships with children's families. Of course, you can coach carers, and coaching is sort of a practice approach that can be applied to many goals. But in this context, we're really thinking about coaching carers towards building better relationships with children's families, and also encouraging an open and positive attitude towards family time. And so one team, the Wollongong team, brought a focus to this in their action research in the practice trial. And what they learnt, and you can see here on the screen, were some practice strategies that they felt were really useful and successful in shifting carers' sort of attitudes and assumptions that they were bringing to both the child's family, as well as to sort of their understanding and acceptance of family time. So some examples of those practice strategies included helping carers to better understand the parent's story. So caseworkers can have those conversations with carers. If you have a good understanding of what's happening for the parent, you can explain that and give that context to the carer so that they remain open and understanding and build empathy towards the parent. So, helping them to recognise what's impacting them. For example, if they're having mental health issues, or perhaps there are barriers to attending family time as a result of disability, or perhaps, they're just emotionally struggling with saying goodbye to their children at the end of family time. Caseworkers can also assist carers to process any frustration that comes up, especially when visits are cancelled last minute. And they can bring conversations back to the child's experience. So, for example, if you're working with a carer and they're talking negatively about the child's family, or talking negatively about the family time visit, you as a caseworker could encourage them to think about it from the child's point of view. How is the child experiencing this? Why is it important for them to see their family? It's also important to challenge some of the assumptions that carers might hold towards family members. Perhaps those assumptions and attitudes have been formed from incidents that happened several years ago, and perhaps you as a caseworker can work with that carer to develop a better understanding about where the parent is at the moment, and have things changed? Are they in a better place now? And also encouraging attention to positive interactions during visits. Often what we heard from the caseworkers in the study was that often carers were focusing on anything that went wrong during the visit, any negative interaction. But a caseworker can draw attention to any small positives, any little wins, any meaningful interaction between the child and their family during a visit, and encourage carers to look for those instead of always looking for the negatives.
Sarah, I might just jump in here and take control and flip through some of if that's okay?
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. Okay, and just quickly, So you can find these resources, as Sarah said, on the website. So there's a beautiful resource that goes with this. And quickly, we also worked with the parents that Sarah talked about, who are on our expert reference group, to support the practice around debriefing that you heard about earlier. And I won't go through some of the learnings that we gained from that action research trial, but I would like to draw your attention to the 3 resources that we worked on with 2 parents with experience of having children in care. And these are beautiful resources that look at how parents can contribute to being a resource in the lives of their children who are in care by supporting the stability of their placements and supporting those relationships. And the importance for those parents in understanding where they're at themselves emotionally before and around visits. And then looking at how by reflecting on what they might be feeling and understanding what their child their child might feel in relation to family time visits. So bringing that attention and awareness, and then looking at how they can support the other adults. And this goes back to the things that you heard Judy talking about from Popples and the results there, understanding what might be getting in the way of parents showing up or being present at family time, and then them understanding how to build connections with carers to support children. And really, for those parents, thinking about how they can be a resource, but also support themselves and celebrate the small victories, celebrate the times where family time works, and get support to improve future family time experiences with their child. So really getting that sort of team around the child. And we think this is a really good resource also for practitioners to think about how to bring parents more into the conversations about what shape family time takes for children, as well as, of course, bringing children into that conversation. You can find everything, as Sarah said, on our website. We'd really love to hear how you find those learning modules as well. So thanks very much. I'm going to hand over to Jess, back to Jess for the panel.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Judy, Sarah and Susan. And it's just fantastic to have such high quality New South Wales based research on the needs of children and how important relationships are with families and carers. And, really terrific to see this research evidence being turned into practical modules and tools that can be used by people in the field. So thank you so much. We'll now move on to the live panel discussion. So I'll introduce to you our panel members. We have Rebecca Hinchy, who is manager of our out-of-home care program at the Department of Communities and Justice. We also have Madeline Gill, who is a senior project officer in the practice strategy and design team within the Office of the Senior Practitioner in the department, and previously a caseworker, so has a great range of skills to provide to this discussion. And Joel Frost, who is a casework specialist in the Illawarra, Shoalhaven and Southern team within the Office of the Senior Practitioner as well. So thank you so much. Now, do we have any questions in the chat yet? If you haven't yet put one in and you have a question, by all means, please put them in there. And perhaps I'll kick off. So, Rebecca, what's the department's current policy position on family time?
I guess some of the key points, Jess, are that family time's really, it's not just about the child being with their parents, but it's really about all the people in the child's life. So siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents, other kin. Really important when casework staff are thinking about family time, that they're talking to all of those people and talking to children about who are the important people in their life that they'd like to spend time with. And I think really goes to what some of the researchers were saying about belonging and culture, about family time really supports the child's sense of belonging, supports their relationships, supports their cultural cultural permanency, and is also, as we know, a really key part in achieving legal permanency for a child. So for most children, hopefully that's about spending time with their parents and family to go home, but also we know it's really key for those children that might be on a path to guardianship or even open adoption. Just also really that message about planning with everyone for good family time or good contact to take place for a child, so that's the carer or aunt or uncle or whoever the child is living with, also with the parents, with the child, and with other people. And I think that goes on to us trying to have family time or contact that's a bit more natural. And so it's not just about being in the DCJ office or PSP provider office, but is about, what's that child doing anyway? Is it going to the soccer games or the birthday celebrations or the cultural celebrations that are really important to the family? The importance of supporting a carer, because the carer is that really key role in supporting the child. And I think that was really well elaborated on in the research about how important that role is and how important the casework role is to support the carer as well. And then I think also that importance about supervision is that it's not just about, sitting there and report writing, but if we're supervising family time, it's really about supporting and having a coaching role, whether that's through a supervisor or the caseworker or some sort of family time worker. And then just on that supervision as well, just noting that, obviously we need to follow what's in the court orders, but, where we can, should be really moving to the family time that either the carer's being involved or that, doesn't need to be supervised by a caseworker. That's probably, I guess, some of the key policy messages. And I think that happy really to hear from the other panel members on some of their thoughts.
Well, if there's no further comments on that question, I might just move to Madeline. So Madeline, what's the latest practice advice about providing positive family time and some of the strategies that you employ to overcome some of these challenges to arranging quality family time?
Thank you. Look, very briefly, I'll give a quick rundown of some of the practice advice that we at the OSP recently published. So we have some advice on our internal site, Casework Practice, for our practitioners. And it's very much in line with the research talked about today, as well as some of the policy points that Rebecca's mentioned. So briefly, the key messages that we're sharing with practitioners at the moment is that family time helps children stay connected to their personal identity, their culture, and is really important for their sense of belonging. It's also not a one-size-fits-all approach, and it should reflect the permanency goal for a child. So it should be different depending on whether the goal is restoration or adoption or long-term care. So, for example, when a case plan goal is restoration, family time is a really important opportunity for parents to develop and practice their parenting skills. Family time is an opportunity to maintain and rebuild healthy relationships, and healthy family connections are both healing and critical to lifelong well-being. When kids can't go home, family time is also an opportunity for family and kin to play a role in their life. So that could be through providing cultural or educational support or medical care. So in a way that would be informal family time. We also, in the advice, provide some prompts for our practitioners around making decisions around whether family time needs to be supervised or not, and some of the key things to think about. A really strong message in the practice advice now is to really think about what our role is in finding family, as well as our role in facilitating family time. So this is one that stands out in particular for me because I feel like it represents quite a huge cultural shift in our work, particularly since I started as a caseworker, I think it was about 12 years ago. So back at that time where I was trained as a child protection caseworker, it was really common for kids to have family time that was the bare minimum, so 4 to 6 times in their care plan each year. And really there wasn't a lot of work done to critically assess that and whether that was actually in their best interests. Parents were given very little support or coaching, and they were sort of placed in supervised settings that were very unnatural and really put in a position to prove themselves. So now what we're saying to our practitioners is that our role extends beyond supervision and coordination of family time. And given that it's an opportunity for healing and connection for kids, we need to be actively modelling and coaching healthy relationships, as well as supporting parent-child interactions and supporting carers to build relationships with parents and family and kinship networks. In terms of overcoming some of the challenges to family time, I know that there can be a lot of things that can come up in practice. Very briefly, our sort of practice advice is talk to children, talk to parents and carers. If there's concerns or safety needs to be built within supervised family time, we're encouraging our staff to use tools that are available. They're actually available publicly through the Partnering for Safety website. So there's like a building safe contact tool and a family safety circles tool. We're also strongly encouraging people to be building purposeful partnerships. So if there's situations where there might be family members or a young person is in custody or detention, or someone might be hospitalised in the family, you know, we can build partnerships with health, youth justice, corrections staff to plan family time. And we need to be providing practical support to help people get there. There's also public programs available that we can harness, such as the Shine for Kids in Prison, the Shine for Kids Prison in Visit program, and the Corrective Services Travel and Accommodation Assistance Scheme. So the general message we're highlighting is that despite barriers, family time can go on and be a safe and enriching experience for kids and families. And we strongly encourage people to get creative and use technology where necessary if face-to-face contact isn't going to be suitable.
Thanks so much, Madeline. We will get to some of the questions in the chat in a second, but just firstly, Joel, what do you think is important in promoting positive family time, and are you able to give some examples from your experience?
Yeah, sure. So I think the most important thing is asking the family and kids, you know, about their experience of family time, and really ask them what their hopes and dreams are for spending time with their family. Family time arrangements should use the principle of family-led decision making, and this is especially important for Aboriginal families because, as an Aboriginal man myself, I often wonder what my great nan would have wanted if she got the chance to see her Aboriginal family after being taken. Could she have sat with anyone from Mob and do weaving or Aboriginal art, or walk along the Murray River, just connecting the country, simple things like hearing stories and looking at photos. And by her and other Aboriginal kids today not having, you know, positive and regular family time, the negative disconnection effects on future generations will be resounding. And to combat some of this, you need to have meaningful and memorable ideas to promote family time that is, you know, positive. So things like events like the annual Rugby League Koori Knockout. You could support the kids and family members to attend their favourite sports teams, their opening match, and yeah, feel free to flag the Dragons or the Matildas if needed. And then continue this support every year to promote ongoing connection and to encourage a family tradition. Fishing is a great activity to promote family time, as it can connect kids to culture, identity, and it also provides a skillful life. Regular and predictable attendance at camps with siblings, cousins, and other family. Even better, more points if you get it on country or at a place where kids live for a significant period of time. ID Know Yourself, Australian Childhood Foundation, they're great organisations to consult with, to talk about, you know, ways to enhance positive and culturally responsible family time. You don't need to spend heaps of money, like going to Flip Out or, you know, those play centres, because it's unrealistic and it sets a precedent for expectations of family time that it's always fun. Another one is corroboree, which is generally a big dancer, and it celebrates a cultural event, and it's a good thing to look out for to support kids to attend the on country, because they'll see family there, and they happen really regularly. It's important to foster creativity. If a child's artistic, then support the child to attend a regional art gallery with their family annually. If they like gardening or whatever, you can enter the largest pumpkin in the local show. You can support family to attend the Stedfords, schools, dance performances, reading a book with teenagers separately, though at the same time, and then meeting later in family time to talk about what they thought about the book, and do this regularly because you can foster connection. A really important aspect is for family members to be age and gender appropriate. Prioritize coaching around what communication and body language to employ in order to foster a safer and better experience for family time. So for little kids, when it's safe to do so, hugging and being physically close and holding eye contact is good. But for teenagers, it's not suitable because they respond better to kicking the footy together, or go walking beside them, go fishing, sit and look at the ocean. Play video games with them. If it doesn't need to be supervised, just don't do it. And look at the permanency case management policy, where it asks practitioners to reflect on why the family time is supervised. And just lastly, I couldn't express this more strongly enough. If you can really value one-on-one time, kids really value that. So, go on a dance practice with just dad, or with just grandpa, or with just mum. Kids love that. Yeah.
It's fantastic, Joel. Really insightful and great practical examples. Just following on from that, there's a question in the chat about how are we as practitioners making family and kin feel truly invited into the kids and carers' lives for us to be partners in this work. And I think that really sort of summarises the findings across evidence about how important it is to have strong relationships. Do the panel or presenters have comments on that question?
I could add something in there, Jess.
Please go
the
ahead.
research from overseas is showing that you can buffer, you can mitigate bad relationships or poor relationships in one sphere with that in another. So that the Big N score, USN score study has shown that for adolescents, if they've got a poor relationship with their birth mother, for example, but a good relationship with their carers, then they're doing much better. So, and particularly if they're in kinship care. So that, as I said, it's what they need is as many positive relationships. And so that's like a triangle. Well, it's actually more than a triangle, because you've got your carers, your birth family, your extended birth family included, and kin, and the caseworkers and the child. So it's all of those relationships going in all those directions that need support and to work well for children to really fare well. And the sort of examples that Joel just gave are fantastic. That you can often do much better with adolescents, for example, when you're driving a car, because you don't have to look at each other, and you can have conversations that you might not feel comfortable with face to face.
And I'll just add on to that too, if I may, Jess, to what Judy said. It's never too late. So, these are relationships that change, like all our relationships do over time. So I suppose it's that kind of optimism and hope that if family members aren't in the life of a child or young person at one point in time, that doesn't mean that they aren't available or are able to be at a different point. I think that also resonates with what Joel said and what Madeline said. About family finding and so on. So, yeah, invest in the longer term.
Terrific, thank you. Well, we've run out of time. It feels like it's gone very quickly because there's been so much terrific discussion. But if people have further questions, by all means, please email our research partnerships team. For the questions that have been put in the chat, we will respond to those as well. And I just really want to thank you all so much for joining us today. And for everyone that have registered, you'll receive an email with the link, so where you'll be able to view a recording of the webinar and share that amongst your colleagues. And hopefully we will see you at a future Lunch and Learn coming this year. Thank you again so much, and I hope you have a great day today. Many thanks.